Good morning, everyone. This is John Scarborough. I wanted to do a little discussion on this garden this morning. Kind of what our plans are. We've had a deep mulch system in the past. We've tried to do a no-till system, and it's worked pretty good. It's still, I would say that we still haven't gotten it completely figured out. And I went over in a couple other videos kind of briefly discussing some of the stuff that we've done and some of the things we've tried out. So y'all, if you're not subscribed to my channel, subscribe to my channel, please. And go and check out some of those other videos and see kind of some of the stuff that we've done. We haven't put out a huge amount of content on the gardening stuff. If that's something that my subscribers would like to see more of, put that in the comments, let me know. But anyway, what we're going to try to do today is talk a little bit about our future plan to help out with our garden system, to maybe make the no-till system slightly better. Because we're following some of the stuff we've seen in the other stuff, and I still don't just love the system. I like the system a lot, but I think it could be tweaked, and I think it could be better. So as always, I always try to make sure that I follow what somebody's example is to a T until I learn about it. Once I feel fairly confident and then I learn, then I kind of add my own stuff in if I think it's necessary, or if I think it could just use some improvement. Okay, sometimes I like my stuff, sometimes I don't. There's a lot of times I do something and I find out wasn't a good idea. Okay. Anyway, so that's farming for you. Them chickens are after them ducks a little bit. But anyway, so what I'm thinking here, this is going to be the half of the garden that we will be growing next year. Outside of the fact that we've got some corn and some garlic over in there, the goal eventually is to rotate from half to half. So like have everything planted on this half one year and then everything planted on the other half the next year. That's kind of what we're thinking. So this year, we'll have all of this. Currently it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have space for a 6th bed up there, so we could do 12 beds if we really wanted to, but I think we're going to stick to 6 and then rotate, have one half with nothing for a whole year. Maybe we'll see. I may rotate it to where, maybe I'll do more than that. I'm not sure, but for now I think that's how we're going to do it. So with the deep mulch, a lot of times you come up with some problems here and there. You'll have your deep mulch beds, and when you first start out, after you've been doing it for a while, that's where you really start to reap the dividends of all your work. But your first couple of years, you'll either have to cover crop it, or you will have to tarp it or something, and you'll battle weeds a little bit more. It's still not as bad. And I definitely would advise, when you first get started with the deep mulch system, if you can find some of those really heavy-duty thick watermelon boxes or pumpkin boxes, or some kind of thick heavy-duty box that you find at a grocery store, if you can go up there and you can get those boxes, that is an excellent way to get started. That will definitely suppress the weeds better than anything I've seen, and then building your beds on top of that. That is absolutely marvelous for your first year. I would definitely suggest that. Once you do that, then after that, it's your second year where that cardboard has decomposed, and you're finally starting to battle some of those other weeds, and it's something you have to contend with. So I'm kind of thinking for our system, rather than worrying with the tarp and worrying with all these problems, we want to create revenue on the farm with less work and more income. I mean, that's kind of the goal, okay? And it's not a perfect system, but essentially what we want to do is make it to where we're able to bring in more types of revenue on the farm, because that's kind of what this channel is about, is making income from home. And in our case, a big part of our income comes from the farm and what we can sell at our store. Okay. So kind of what we got in mind for, rather than tarping it, because on this side, what you would have to do, would be to tarp this all year. okay? So we could tarp all 3 of those sides. Just tarp it and don't do nothing with it. It would kill off the grass. It does work, you know, but it's like, I don't know. There's something about it I just don't like, you know. All of that, you know, the tarp just laying there. It's stuff that you got to contend with. It's more money you got to spend for the tarp. So I think what we're going to try is putting the chickens in one area, and then we're going to put the coffee grounds in. The coffee grounds is a low-grade protein for them. They eat a small amount of it. They actually don't eat very much of it. But what it really is a fertilizer for the, it's a fast release, but then also it's got a lot more slow release nitrogen in it, and then it's got some decent potassium and things like that in it as well. So it's a pretty good slow release overtime fertilizer, but then it's also got some micronutrients that are in it, and things that, some trace minerals even, I believe, that it's got in it. So it's just some really good stuff to put in the garden. So we put it in there, and then we put it in there while the chickens are in there. They get a little bit out of it, but mostly what I find is bugs actually will be attracted to that. The small amount of bugs will actually be attracted to that. And that's kind of the downside to putting too much of it in your own garden during the growing season, which we do. But we're trying this out because the bugs are attracted to it. So then the chickens, you're actually feeding the chickens with the bugs that are in there, okay? So we leave them on here for close to a week, okay? Letting them impact it and all like that, and then we move it over, and they're really heavily grazing it. We may even go longer than a week later. I don't know. Right now, this is how we're trying it. So they're heavily grazing it and helping to keep the weeds and grass down, rather than us having to come in and tarp the whole thing. Now, that's not a perfect system, and that by itself will not work. So after moving them on all 3 of these spaces, we got 3 spaces here that we're actually going to experiment with this year, and I think it's going to be really good. After moving them all the way across, then we're going to get that mulch over there, and we're going to spread it all out in here. We're not going to spread it perfectly because the chickens will do a lot of that, but we're going to kind of spread it out in here and create some nice, just a nice big covering. We're not going to try to create perfect beds or anything, just a deep mulch covering. So then we'll come back over here, you know, once we feel like it's recovered long enough, we'll come back with the chickens and they'll be on a nice deep mulch. It's probably going to be about June by then, maybe, because we'll probably go ahead and keep them off of that for a good month. Even though we're only doing week moves, we'll probably spend another week somewhere else, give it a good chance to rest, get all of that on there, and then put that down. We may even give it a 2-month rest. I don't know, but I don't want to wait so long that the grass starts to come back. So we'll cover this up and then probably gauge it by once the grass itself starts to bust through the deep mulch, okay? And that may even be July, okay? Once that starts to happen, that's probably when we're going to put the chickens in. We're going to put them in, let them start killing that grass back out. Because the goal with deep mulch bedding is actually a little bit different from your traditional pastured birds or your pastured animals of any type. Because with pasture, you want to keep that that recovery of the grass. You don't want to graze it down too hard. You want to make sure that grass is always coming back and it's strong and it's vibrant. But with deep mulch, you want it to be almost like a forest bed, okay? And you want it to be pretty much killing off everything except for what you plant. That's kind of the goal. You want your plants to do well and everything else to just be smothered out. And that's, I mean, that's kind of what it is, what you're doing. But then it's also all of the organic matter that you're slowly releasing and all of the natural nitrogens that comes from the earthworms and things like that. So anyway, so then we'll get our birds back in, let them start to kill out all of those grasses and things like that. They'll also be feeding on the any type of worms or bugs or anything that's attracted to that wood, all those wood chips, because it's a larger chip. I mean, it's a good chunk of wood is what it is. And we'll put all that in there. They'll feed on that and eat the bugs that are in there while inoculating it with their chicken litter, okay? Now, we're going to be in the dead of summer by this point, okay? At that point, at some point during that inoculation, that will start to heat up because it's going to turn into kind of a compost system. Okay, it won't be a perfect compost because it's not going to be high enough. Okay, but it will start to heat up and get a composting. When that happens, we want to be sure to move the birds because we don't want the birds to be too hot in the summertime. So we're going to use that as our gauge. Once it starts to heat up, that's going to be our gauge. That's going to be telling us, okay, it's time to move forward. Even though we could leave them there during that time, because you can actually leave animals in one spot for longer if you use a deep mulch system. That's the only system that I have heard, and the only system I have seen myself that works very well if you're going to leave them in one spot. So then we'll move them forward, and we'll do the same thing all the way down the 3 beds. If it takes a month, I'm estimating a month. I would say it'd be a good 3 months. We'll be out of the summer by the time we get back over there. We want to make sure that there's nothing growing in over here. Now, there may be a little bit here and there, but the idea around this is low maintenance, less work for us. The chickens are doing their thing, and they're doing the work, okay? That's the goal, is the chickens and the ducks, they're doing all the work. We're not having to do any work, but yet they're also getting, they're actually being healthy, and it's actually going to help their production, and it's helping to feed them as well. Okay, so it's kind of like a great trade-off that we're going to be able to get from that. Kind of like plants and fungus in the soil, they actually kind of have a trade-off, and different things in the soil have a trade-off to help each other. Well, that's kind of going to be what this is, okay? So now we're going to move it down, and then we'll take it back over here. At this point, we want to be careful, okay? Because we're probably going to be in about August, maybe even early September when we move it back over, or when we could move it back over. So we want to be cautious, because if it's September, but yet it's still hot, because for us in early September, it can still be quite warm. If it is warm, especially during, even if it's just warm during the day and the bed is warm, then we want to be careful about putting them in there. So we'll gauge that on whether or not the bed is too hot. So if you plan on doing something like that, don't stick them on that bed when it's real hot, because then you're probably end up killing them, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll wait. We'll give it just a smidge of time, let them get all the way through, and then come winter time, or come as soon as it starts to cool down, because this is not going to get as hot as a big compost pile. It's just going to be warm, okay? So come winter time or whatever, or as soon as it starts to cool down, then we'll put them back on here, okay? They'll clean up any weeds or anything that has popped up. They'll re-inoculate it with their stuff. At that point, it will have cooled the compost that's on the ground will have cooled down some, but then they're going to re-stir it all back up and re-inoculate it with more compost while killing off anything. At that point, we're in the cool season. Nothing's going to grow except for cool season grasses, which I'm not too worried about, as long as you make sure the seed head doesn't go back in there. The cool season stuff just ends up being good mulch and also good feed for them. But I would be willing to bet that we won't get very much cool season stuff in there either, okay? So the point is after that, that warming system will actually be good for them, and we'll be able to go back and forth through here through the whole winter with, inoculating this, stirring it up, keeping it nice and going, keeping it nice and breaking down and hot like a bed should be, or like a compost pile should be, okay? And feeding them as well, okay? But also keeping them warm. So in the wintertime, they shut down just a little bit. They slow down with their egg production. They slow down with a lot of the things they do because it's really cold. So I don't know if that will help their egg production, but I will be curious to see how that will work. But I do think that it's going to help out a lot in just in helping increase their comfort level and helping them to be warmer and better off, But I think the long-term goal of this, then, come next spring when it's time to replant again, then I think all we got to do is make beds out of that mulch, out of everything that's there, create the beds, and then change sides, start planting on this side. it may not work out like that. It may be more like we're grazing chickens on this side for 2 years, instead of 1. But however it works out, I think it's going to be a far superior system as far as labor intensity. The deep mulch system ends up being less labor over the course of the summer, but it's a lot of labor all at one time, all at the beginning when you're first getting it off. And then you also got some income that you got to put in with the tarps and things like that. So I think this system will help eliminate a lot of that, and it's going to help us to be able to create income in places that we would normally have the time to get the income. Because, I mean, we're stretching ourselves a little thin with all the stuff that we're doing. So if we go trying to deep mulch all of this, it could end up being a little bit intensive, or at least right now, it's something that could build over time. So I really think this is going to kind of give us the advantage on that. But also I think it's going to be a superior system as well, because you're really, really laying down that fertility and for that whole time. So while you're killing the weeds, you're also laying down the heavy, heavy fertility, and you're just doing so much for the soil. I really think it's going to be a good system. So then the final thing I think we will do, we really liked the well, sometimes it's tarp, whatever it is, but it's just a weed cloth. Sometimes it's a cloth, sometimes it's a tarp. They have different things. I think the best one is more like a tarp, okay? But I think that's what we're going to do. I think we'll end up using the weed tarp as well. So I think by combining the deep mulch system with the tarp, I really think that when it comes time to grow, and then the chickens change side and they all go to that side, I think it's going to be great. I think that it's going to be way, way more low maintenance. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect system, but I really think it's going to be a lot better trying it out that way. So we're going to try it. We're going to let y'all kind of ride along. It'll be a good, it'll be something that's going over the course of a couple of years, the experiment. But we're definitely going to let y'all see how it works. We may not like that. The only downside to doing that, putting your birds in, so like when we put them in over here, is we've actually created beds here. So they will actually mess the beds up. They'll spread the beds all back out and everything. But I'm not that concerned about it. At first I was, and I was skeptical about doing it. But I really don't think I'm going to be that concerned. But it may be something that we don't like. It may be something that it just ends up being not quite how we want it to be. So if that's the case, if we do find that we don't like it, then it may be that the chickens are just a good starting point. Like they really help you to get started getting really rid of your weeds. And then once that's over and you've got your deep mulch beds and all like that, then it may be that we never do it again. We never put the chickens back in. Maybe it may end up being just ducks, because ducks don't disturb it as badly. I don't know yet for sure what the best bet's going to be. I don't think them messing up those beds is going to be that big of a deal. I think in that scenario, even though I don't like running a tractor on my garden, I would just take that little small tractor and then come back through and actually recut out and carve the beds up, and not actually break the soil. So it's not going to be like it's still going to be no-till, because we won't go down into the actual soil. We'll just use the mulch that's there to create more beds. The other option, of course, is to just take our compost, because we do compost big piles of compost, and re-strip actual compost on top of the stuff that's underneath. And I think that might be a good option too. So I'm not sure. We will see, and we'll definitely let y'all know. Don't forget to like and subscribe as always.